And you are podcasting with Gary DeMar. Let's figure things out.
Hello?
Hey, Gary, it's Kirk.
Kirk Cameron. What
Hey,
are you
man.
doing? What are you doing calling me? I'm right in the middle of doing a podcast here, and my phone rings, and you show up. I had something I've worked a week on this podcast, and then now I'm going to have to stop and talk to you. So how
I understand you have a bigger name on the other line. I can call back later.
So how have you been?
I've been really good. Thank you. I'm in California right now. I spend a lot of time in the Franklin, Nashville, Tennessee area because I have 3 kids who live there. So we're getting them settled in, but doing well, and a much needed break from travel here in California.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I'm glad I've kind of given it up. I've got to go down to Tampa in March, first week of March, just to speak at a conference down there. Well, actually, I'm doing some lectures, and then I'm going to do something in Arkansas as well. What I want to talk to you about is kind of what you are in fact doing, and to get something of your perspective on the heartbeat of people, what you're experiencing with some of your library experiences with people. But before I do that, though, Marshall Foster is, you and I. It was a great friend of ours. He died. It was in 2022. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we've got that right.
So, getting to know you through Marshall, what was Marshall's influence on you, and the impact that it's had on you in terms of kind of the things that you're doing today?
Sure. So, Gary, are we starting the recording yet?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I had to get all of the the off-color remarks out of the way before we start recording. But now that I know we're recording, I'll just save those for later.
Okay.
Boy, the influence that Marshall had on me was really profound, and I'm so glad that I bumped into Marshall in an airport in Los Angeles. I actually was wrestling with the idea after having 6 children of whether or not we should have any more, and I was asking all these different people, and I was given a book called The Battle for the 21st Century from a friend. And in it talked about family dynasties and the gift of children and who are you, oh man, to close the womb and these kinds of things. And the author was Marshall Foster. And so I thought, you know what? There's no way I'm getting a vasectomy. The wrath of God is going to come down on me if I do. And then I bumped into this guy in the airport who said, "Are you Kirk Cameron?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "My name's Marshall Foster." And I said, You're the man that has been giving me indigestion. And what do you think you're doing saying things like this? And he said, "Well, let's go have a cup of coffee." We did. We became fast friends, and we talked about evangelism, discipleship. And he gave me a picture of the kingdom of God through the lens of history that just made me feel like a tiny little mouse with no spiritual muscles. And he talked about Alfred the Great, and he talked about St. Patrick, and he talked about the Reformers and St. Lawrence and men of valor throughout history that had a view of the kingdom that was so much bigger than, oh no, the Antichrist is coming, beam me up, Scotty, so we can get out of here before the whole thing collapses. It wasn't a defeatist, escapist mentality. It wasn't just, get people into the lifeboat before the Titanic of the world sinks. It was onward, Christian soldier. The power and the healing, transforming power of the gospel is going to flow wherever the curse is found, and is going to fill the earth with the knowledge of the glory of God, just like the waters cover the seas. And there is victory in the gospel because the kingdom is advancing. It's not a retreat to heaven. And I thought, wow, what kind of mushrooms are you smoking? And where do you get this from? And then he began discipling me and taking me on trips to Scotland and England and Holland and New England, and teaching me about the Pilgrims and the Reformers, and gave me a whole new view of the gospel of the kingdom.
And you collaborated on a film called Monumental. And what brought that about?
So Monumental came out of a family field trip that Marshall Foster took me, my wife, and kids on to Massachusetts. And we visited the graveyard of the Pilgrims, their original houses, or at least the street that their houses were on, and the church that they worshiped at, which has since, I think, turned into a Unitarian Universalist meeting place. Don't even want to call it a church when you sort of see what's going on there. And then he showed me what I thought was the crown jewel of the Plymouth, Massachusetts area, and that is the Monument to the Forefathers. And that was, and still is, the largest solid granite monument in America, spelling out a biblical worldview left for us by the brilliance and wisdom of these biblicists we call pilgrims. And it spells out their secret sauce recipe on how to build and sustain a free and just society under the Word of God. And it's all rooted in a biblical faith in the God of heaven and in his word, the Bible, and then how that works out in society, first through the heart, then through the home, and then through the place of your business, your church, and civil government. So it's an inside out strategy, they say. It's the bottom, it's bottom up and inside out. It's not government first, top down. It's individual self-government and family first. It's bottom up. And we made a whole documentary tracing the escape route of the Pilgrims on their harrowing journey to Holland for some freedom, and then because of the Spanish, they hightailed it out of there, along with just the pagan culture that they were afraid was getting into the heads of their kids too much, and they wanted to start something that would be a fresh new place for the gospel to flourish, and experiment with this idea called self-government. On the foundation of the gospel, with biblical law as the moral foundation for your laws, in reference to that old Hebrew republic under Moses. And they created the greatest nation in the world, and that is what Monumental, the documentary, is all about.
Yeah, and what's fascinating, we went up there, we did that cruise a number of years ago, and that statue is as large as it is. Mm-hmm. And it could be seen from the harbor, but I guess over the years, the pine trees have grown up so high that you can't see it from the harbor anymore.
That's right.
But that monument was kind of hiding in plain sight. It's been there, but very few people know about it. And you've brought it, and it's kind of in disrepair. When we saw it, when we were up there that year. It's in somewhat disrepair, which is kind of indicative of kind of where we are in terms of our nation today. But it's a fascinating story. When you see it, you're just kind of blown away about who had the vision for this. And around you can kind of get a biblical worldview message as you traverse the statue, because it's not just a statue, but it is emblematic of various education and law and so forth that lays out kind of a Christian worldview in terms of that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Gary, 100%. And it's through Marshall Foster that I really began to be discipled by a lot of your teachings. And Marshall gave me the worldview, and he tried to explain to me what was in the rocket fuel that coursed through these early American Christian veins that compelled them to get on a little boat called the Mayflower, even though half their congregation had to stay behind because of the leaky speed well. It wasn't speedy and it wasn't well, so the pastor with half the church stayed behind, and 102 passengers go across for what? To land in a strange new world where they knew it was going to be difficult. They knew they might not even live, and when they landed in the wilderness, they created the Mayflower Compact. Half of them died the first winter, but they went on to lay down a template that other colonies began to imitate, and they gave for us, to me, the blueprint for lasting liberty and freedom and protection under God. And that's not what I'm seeing today. Most Christians today are saying, "Holy cow, AI is here. Russia and China, for sure. We're looking at Gog, Magog, smog, crime, every nasty, horrible thing that must be the fulfillment of the book of Revelation today in our lifetime." And so the best we can do is get people saved, and let's, get out of here before this whole thing blows up, depending on your eschatological perspective. And these were early American Christians who didn't hold that view. They held a victorious view. It wasn't just patriotism for the sake of patriotism. It was an opportunity to do something that hadn't been done in literally thousands of years. And they had the power of the Holy Spirit in a way that perhaps ancient Israel did not have, because we're on this side of Pentecost and the gospel and the resurrection. And they saw victory in their future with eyes of optimism rather than pessimism and escape as the only way forward. And I thought, where do you get this from? Because I was in a movie called Left Behind.
No, was that you?
That
was you in that?
And I say, and I'm like, I know the Antichrist's phone number. I've sat down and had coffee with him, and he's not a nice guy. And he said, "Oh, Kirk, you need to watch this videotape series by my friend Gary DeMar, and it's called Prophecy 101. And I watched a man stand in front of a camera with a mock turtleneck T-shirt and an Adolf Hitler mustache in front of some silk plants and a fireplace, and teach about 12 people in somebody's living room about Matthew 24. And I just laughed at the assertion that you could demonstrate that up to verse 32 or 34 or whatever the verse is, these things were referring to things that had taken place in the past. And what I thought was especially crazy was the idea that you could demonstrate that the sun had gone dark and the moon had turned to blood and the stars had fallen from the sky and that the heavens had rolled up like a scroll. Clearly, nobody could prove that. And then you just blew my mind. And I thought, wow, I've got to look into this.
Well, that the guy who actually produced that is sitting right across from me.
and he didn't. What kind of friend is he? He let you wear that mustache for years.
Well, yeah, but hey, it's not like a Hitler mustache. That was just right underneath the guy's nose. My mustache is much wider than that. And
okay.
But anyway, and I had curly hair and he didn't. But anyway, so I really appreciate that, and we both appreciate Marshall Foster. And I don't know if you know this, but really, American Vision. I didn't start American Vision. I came on American Vision in 1980. It was started in 1978, 1979, and the fellow who started American Vision had partnered up with Marshall. And they had gotten a grant from CBN, Pat Robertson's organization, and there was a little falling out. I don't know all the details of it. And they split, and Marshall went to California, and the American Vision was here in the Atlanta area. They each had taken $25,000, half of the grant, and started their various ministries. And American Vision grew out of that.
Cool.
And I came on in American Vision in 1980 after I graduated from seminary. So back to I want to get your take. You're traveling around. People are coming out. You've written a couple of books. You're going into these libraries. I don't know who came up with that idea. I think it was brilliant because it's a space that has to be open up because these are public institutions. Give me your take on what you're hearing and what you're seeing from your travels across the country in doing this.
Okay. Well, first of all, Gary, it's a real honor. I should have said this in the very beginning, but it's such an honor to be on your podcast. And I'm so you're such a hero of mine. I love reading your books and stuff because you're just so darn practical. You're not in such ivory towers that you're not accessible or relatable. Yet you do things like quote your opponents in your own arguments, and you have such detailed footnotes that it's really hard to do. And I'm a skeptic, and I always want to know the why behind anybody's claims. So it's humbling to be on your show like this. So I'll go into as much detail as I can and prove every statement that I make in answer to this question.
Okay.
I've been traveling around the country over the last year and a half, and we started by writing a children's book of Christian virtue and requesting to read that book in public libraries. And this is not a new idea. There are other groups of people like drag queens who are doing this all over the country, and they're reading books like I don't want to get into the titles of the books and give them attention, but these are books that are gender confusing. These are books that are making the life of drag attractive to preschoolers, bringing in stories that normalize to fathers, to mothers, all kinds of things like this. And so I simply thought, well, based on the rules of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, these public libraries would love to have a Christian come in, a father of 6 children, someone who's been married for 32 years, and read a book that exalts the fruit of the Spirit: faith, hope, love, joy, kindness, gentleness, self-control. And I was denied, Gary, by over 50 woke libraries that previously held drag queen story hours at those same libraries. Well, I knew this wasn't right because of listening to guys like you, reading books like God and Government, American Vision, the World History Institute, the Mayflower Institute with Marshall Foster, that this was viewpoint discrimination of the worst kind, because I knew they hadn't even read the book. They were discriminating against me because of my faith in Christianity and the Bible. And they said things like, we're not interested in having you come because we're looking for people who are more inclusive. Well, the irony is not lost on me there. They also said, we're looking for authors of color. Your messaging does not align with ours. And I called my buddies at the news, and I wound up on Tucker Carlson's show when he was on Fox, and explained the story and told them that I had written letters to 2 of these libraries and reminded them that this is the United States of America, and if they didn't reverse course with their discrimination, I would be prepared to assert my constitutional rights in court. They changed their tune, and when we showed up at the downtown Indianapolis library, the first stop on our tour, we were greeted, Gary, by over 3,000 parents and grandparents who were enthusiastically cheering and applauding the reading of a book about love, joy, peace, kindness, gentleness, and self-control. In fact, there were so many people in there that we were violating fire codes on this 6-story downtown Indianapolis library, and the people were out the halls, down the escalator, along the sidewalk, and into the parking lot. In fact, the police officer said that this is the largest attended event that they've ever had in the history of this library. And because the reading room was so small, and there were literally thousands of people waiting to get in that would never get in because our window of opportunity would close in an hour, rather than rioting and throwing firebombs through the windows like we saw during the riots when people didn't get what they wanted, what did they do? The moms sat down on the floor in the aisles between the books in the library, and they pulled out their own children's books and began holding their own story time readings for the children on all the different floors of the library, and singing worship songs like Jesus Loves Me and Amazing Grace and God Bless America. It was just beautiful.
So what was the response of the library staff to all of this?
Well, surprisingly, the staff was kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. They loved it. They enjoyed it. How could you not? The police officer says there are never any mothers and children at this library. Why? Because of the protests. There are political fightings going on at the leadership level that bring in the protesters that scare all the families away. And so they said, this is wonderful. We haven't seen kids and families here in years. And so the staff loved that, of course. You'd think that that they would be thrilled that we're drawing people to these institutions that many people have considered archaic. You know, you read ebooks now. You can read everything online. Who needs to go to a library anymore and sit down and check out a book? Well, these thousands came because they wanted to be a part of something restorative, something transformational for their community, and they knew that they needed to show up.
So how many libraries have you been to?
We've been to probably about, I'm going to say somewhere between 15 and 20, and we chose them strategically. We went to Washington, D.C. during the Transgender Week of Rage. We went to New York several times. We went to Phoenix. We went to Los Angeles. We went to San Francisco. And then in June, I wrote a second book called Pride Comes Before the Fall. That's a book about humility, and we released it on during Pride Month, June 1st, and debuted that at the Seattle Public Library in the state of Washington. So we've been to about 15 to 20, and that culminated last summer in a national event called See You at the Library, and that was our take on See You at the Pole. You know, where everybody gets together at the flagpole to pray. We wanted everybody to get together at the library to sing, to pray, and read books of virtue and character to children. And it was a huge success. Even though the American Library Association, which is run by their director, who is an avowed lesbian Marxist, has a virtual conference every year. And the person who is in charge of I think it was like, intellectual properties or freedom and non-discrimination, something like that. She actually named me and our partner by name and mentioned the See You at the Library event and gave library directors instructions on how to block us and shut down that event so that community members could not access their own libraries to read these books on this day.
So what was the end result of that?
Well, we had over 330 libraries in 46 different states that participated, and it was a huge success because we also taught community members how to get around those things and hold the events anyway, because again, these are public libraries paid for by the community members. There is no authority to allow some people into the libraries and shut other people out simply because you don't like their point of view.
Now, did you take camera crews? Have you thought about doing a documentary on this at all?
We did take camera crews, and social media is loaded with videos of these events, and it was a huge success. In fact, lots of things have happened, but some of the most noteworthy ones, the director of the Henderson, Tennessee Library was called up on charges by the board of the library and the community members who testified about how inappropriately he acted when we showed up at his library, dropping books, banging cupboards. The staff was being inappropriate. They were playing loud music so that we couldn't read the books to the kids and do what we had come there to do. Even though he had a crowd of 300, 400, 500 people in the parking lot reciting the Pledge of Allegiance and singing God Bless America and praying outside of his library, he didn't want him there. And so he ended up getting fired and replaced by the community and the commissioners. So all kinds of good things are happening to take out and uproot the evil and replace it with some truth and beauty and goodness.
So what are you doing now? What's on your agenda, your next project that you're working on?
Well, the book company that I've partnered with is called Brave Books. Brave Books is a brand new company, a few years old, and they're just doing amazing things by writing children's books And they got a book of the month club. So if you join, you get a new book every month delivered to your front door with a pro-God, pro-America value. So it's stuff like, freedom of speech, the importance of telling your parents what's going on at school, the fruit of the Spirit, not giving in to your fears, Second Amendment rights, all kinds of things like this. And also warning children about bad things like socialism. They got a book called The Island of Free Ice Cream, and that warns the children about the dangers of a socialist idea. And we've been exposing Scholastic as sort of the head of the snake. They're the world's largest publisher and distributor of children's books. And we grew up with those books and their book fairs, but they've gone so woke and been so infiltrated that they're actually the perpetrators of so much content that is wildly inappropriate. One of their books I was just talking about was called Welcome to St. Hell, My Trans Teen Misadventure, complete with diagrams of underage drinking, clothes off, in bed, transgender teens teaching each other how to sexually arouse them and take hormones to transform their parts into different parts. So this is being given to kids, and there's all kinds of other stuff. So we've been offering an alternative through another book company. It's a brand new nonprofit called Skytree Book Fairs. Skytree Book Fairs have now been replacing Scholastic Book Fairs in over 1,000 schools across the country. Public and private schools have canceled their contract with Scholastic for their book fair, and they're replacing it with Skytree to get all of the classics and the ones we grew up with wholesome values and biblical lessons. And that's exciting.
What's kind of frustrating about all of this is with all of this going on with the schools and the libraries and so forth, and with the transgender stuff, why hasn't there been more of a groundswell of reaction by parents who have their children in these schools? What's the holdout in terms of this?
That's a good question. I think that's the $64,000 question right there. I can't help but think about Eric Metaxas and his new book, A Letter to the American Church, wherein he asks, the question, why didn't the parents and the churches and the pastors and the people of Germany have a groundswell reaction and rise up when they maybe not in the beginning you knew what was going on, but when you finally figure out and the cat's out of the bag, there's more of us than there are of them. Why isn't it happening? And, I think he tries to answer that question. I think a lot of it has to do with fear. I so desperately want people to be students of history, which is why I appreciate you and American Vision and Marshall Foster, because this isn't new. And what I'm encouraged by is I am seeing a groundswell. I am seeing people who are reading the signs of the times, not in a rapture fever kind of way, but in a way that reminds me of, historically, when Israel or any other nation falls away from God or was never near God, and they get to a place of bankruptcy, they're almost over the cliff with no hope of return, and then their eyes finally open and they say, "Oh God, what have we done?" And they turn to the Lord. Well, I'm seeing that happen on an individual basis, and I'm seeing it happen in churches. And my hope and prayer is that the wind of the Spirit will blow on those embers, and it will become like a wild, out of control California brush fire, and it'll spread 0% contained from the West Coast to the East Coast, or from the North to the South, or I don't care where it starts. But I think it's got to start in the hearts of people and spread from there. And that's why it's important that we're talking about this, not waiting for some ministry to do it or some politician to fix it or some rich guy to buy another social media platform. Thank God for the good things being done there. But, who was it? John Adams said at the time of the revolution, it does not take a majority to prevail, but rather a tireless, irate minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in the minds of men.
I don't know if you're familiar with this book. In fact, Eric Metaxas wrote the foreword to it. It was a book by Erwin Lutzer When a Nation Forgets God.
Yep.
7 lessons we must learn from Nazi Germany. And I remember one of the stories in there was that these churches knew what was happening as these trains would go by their churches, and their reaction was just to sing louder when they heard the screams from the people on these trains, as to they knew where they were going. And those in those churches, as the story is, this woman's telling the story about when she was a child that this was going on, that in order to drown out those sounds, they just sang their hymns louder. And and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, is because you are, you're out there more than I am, and most of my work is done on my computer in my office. You have kind of your hand on the pulse of what's going on out there, and I wanted to give people, some good news, some optimism as to what's going on out there. But I think what's one of the things that's happening is that people, they see other people like Riley Gaines and others who are standing up and are losing, maybe lost something as a result of that. But as a result, when other people see other people take a stand, they say, "Yeah, there are other people out there doing this too."
That's right.
I want to join into it as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right, Gary. And I got to tell you, you're at the tip of the spear. I mean, I see you taking shots and hits by, and this is like from our own team on stuff that makes me cringe, because I say Gary asks great questions. Gary is willing to have the conversations that other people aren't willing to have, and I get it. I mean, there's things I would be reluctant to say here on this podcast about what I really think about some particular issues, because even raising the question can get you tarred and feathered and crucified in the public square by the Orthodox teachers, because there's too much to lose by even opening the Pandora's box of questions on things. And I don't know. I do think, however, that we have to remember turning this nation around and igniting the fires of revival ultimately are controlled by a sovereign God. And that gives me great comfort, because I think, well, holy cow, if it's really all up to Elon Musk and Donald Trump, we're in trouble. And yet, I know that we have responsibility in this whole mess, because we have really caused it. I mean, through our apathy, through our complacency, through our idolatry, we meaning myself, and then us collectively within the church, taking our hands off the wheel, allowing compromise, allowing the culture to influence the church more than the church influencing the culture. And this rapture fever theology has got so many that I know saying things like, well, Kirk, what are you doing trying to save America? What are you doing trying to reverse course? Can't you see how close we are to the finish line? Things are supposed to get worse. Haven't you read the book of Revelation? The Antichrist is coming. We just need to be ready. And I'm thinking, holy cow, what are you going to tell your kids? And, I've got friends that have said to me, I don't really try to make a significant difference culturally, because my pastor tells me that we are likely going to see the return of Christ in our generation. And it's really exciting, but it's also, on the other hand, sad, because that means I know my daughter will never get married.
Oh, wow.
And she'll never experience motherhood.
Wow.
And I think, wow, what you think about the end of the game really does matter in the middle of the game. And I think we're not at the end of the game. I don't even really think we're in the middle. I think we're in the early days of the church. And I think it's a very important and exciting time to be alive and to be not just believers, but people who think critically and really try to understand the right application of God's word to our time on the stage of the world right now.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on, and I really do appreciate your kind words. And I've been following your material for quite some time, and my wife and I, she'll come up and say, "Hey, look, Kirk's going to be here. Kirk's going to be there." Like I said, you're always welcome. You ever get into the Atlanta area, make sure. I've got to tell this story. I think the last time we met, you were in Atlanta. I think you had two of your older daughters with you, and we went to that Longhorn Steakhouse for lunch. And as we were leaving, we're leaving out, and I turned around and I said, "Where's Kirk?" I said, where'd he go? Well, I kind of figured. So I go back, and in the booth behind us, there were 2 or 3 women who wanted to get pictures with you. And I think, yeah, there you go. You know, I'm just a cog in the wheel, but Kirk is the one that's really delivering here.
No, that's not what happened, Gary. They wanted to get my picture because they knew that I had sat mere feet away from Gary DeMar.
Yeah, you can keep keep telling that story.
To memorialize it.
Yeah, you keep telling that story. I appreciate it. So, again, thanks, Kirk. It's always good to talk to you. But again, if you are in the Atlanta area, make sure you get in contact with me, and we'll sit down and do some, just sit around and just talk.
I would love it. That'd be fantastic.
All right.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks.
Have a great day. Thanks, bro.
You too.
Bye.
Thanks for podcasting with Gary DeMar. Please subscribe and share this with anyone you think really needs to hear it.